We come to our first keynote speaker, and I'm very sorry we're running late. I want to announce our keynote speaker from Dubai, Professor Dr. Mostfafa Al-Emran. He's currently working at the Faculty of Engineering and IT at the British University of Dubai. He received his PhD degree in computer science from University Malaysia, Pahang, and a Master of Science degree in informatics from the British University in Dubai, with distinction, and a Bachelor of Science degree in computer science from Al-Buraimi University College, with honors. He is among the top 2% scientists in the world, according to the reports published by Stanford University in October 2020 and October 21 as well. He has published over 95 research articles, and his main contributions have appeared in highly reputed journals. Most of his publications were indexed under the ICI Web of Science and Scopus. He has edited a number of books published by Springer. He is also certified recognized reviewer by several leading journals in Elsevier. His current research interests include human-computer interactions, knowledge management, educational technology, and artificial intelligence. He will speak today about a special topic that all researchers love. You will be our star tonight. He talks about the arts of publishing in impact factor journals. Mostfafa, we would like to know how we can publish in highly ranked journals. The floor is yours.
Thank you for the invitation, and thank you for the introduction as well. Thank you so much.
Looking forward to the secrets of publishing.
Yeah, so I did my best to be concise and to be within the limitation of the keynote. So I would not go further in details. So I prepared the slides to be within like 40 minutes, and of course I will keep some minutes at the end of the presentation for QA session. So the topic is about how to publish in impact factor journals. Publishing in impact factor journals is a bit stricter process, and it's not like the way that we publish in regular journals or any conferences or any book chapters. It's the way is very strict, and we will see like what are the points that the editors and reviewers are looking for at the time when they are reviewing the manuscripts submitted to impact factor journals. First, we need to understand what is an impact factor before we go a bit forward in the presentation. So impact factor is usually the number of citations in the previous 2 years divided by the number of publications in these 2 years. For example, if we this is an example here, like this is the impact factor for the Nature journal, and I believe that all of you are aware of the Nature journal. This is the impact factor of the journal in 2017. It's calculated by the summation of the total citations in 2016 and 15 divided by the number of publications in these 2 years. Again, if we try to calculate the impact factor for like in 2021 for these journals, the journals in this year, it's calculated by summating the number of citations for the papers, number of citations in 2020 and 2020 and 2019, and divided by the number of publications in these 2 years. So this is how it goes when we calculate the impact factor, or the journal, how do they calculate the impact factor for their journals. So the question is that why do we need to publish in impact factor journals if it's a very strict process and takes a lot of time? Because publishing in these journals, like it takes from 4 months to 3-4 years. It depends on the review process. So yeah, the shortest time that I was lucky to publish, it was 4 months. That when I submitted the paper, I was lucky that the editor-in-chief liked the paper. He put it in the review process. We received comments after 45 days. We addressed the comments, then it goes back, then it is accepted and get it online in just 4 months. That was the shortest time for me to publish in journals. Usually, when I publish in the top tier journals, those are the top 10 in my field. Usually, it takes 8 months to 1 year. But from the experience of my colleagues, there are some journals that take that exceeds that limit. Specifically, when the reviewers keep asking for more revisions. This is and sometimes even if you do the revision, the editor might ask or raise some other questions, the editor or associate editors. So this you will keep yourself into another round. So why it is important to publish in these journals? While there are journals where you submit your article in the morning, you will get acceptance in the evening. So what's the difference? I mean, why it is important? The first is one of the main important point to be recognized in the field, the main field or the subfield of your research domain. When you publish in these journals, you will be a key figure in your specialization, and you will be invited for evaluating like the promotions for academics. You will be invited to deliver a keynote. You will be invited as an examiner, and so on. There are a lot of benefits for getting the recognition of or to be recognized in your research domain. The other part is that, or the other point is that it's a requirement for promotion for faculty members. Many universities put many restrictions for promoting the academics, like from assistant professor to associate professor and from associate to full professors. It's not like simply as you go to publish in like regular journals, but it's some reputed universities put it as a criteria for promotion. And it's for most of the reputed universities, specifically the research-based universities, it's a requirement for graduation, specifically for the PhD students. And because I did my PhD in Malaysia, in Malaysia also the some of the MSc students, it was also a requirement for them, specifically if they receive some fund from the university, they need to publish like one impact factor journal. And it's a requirement for international institutional ranking, specifically like now most of the universities are running here and there for improving their rank, like QS ranking, the Times Higher Education, and there are different ranking systems. It's a requirement for such type of ranking, and it's also a requirement for employment in reputed universities. Like many reputed universities, when you apply, they will look at the list of your publications, and they will see whether you have like get the chance to publish in impact factor journals or not. This is very important in if you want to get a career in a top ranked university. And also to get a research fund. When you apply for a research fund, of course, by the end of the day, we need to publish our work. So, and publishing the work, again, it should be published in high recognized, influenced journals. So they will not provide the fund if you don't have, I'm not generalizing, but most of the, like how you can get the research fund, and specifically if you want to get it from a reputed institution or organization, they will look whether you have successfully published in impact factor journals or not. And again, it's some of the publishers, if you try to edit books with them, they also look at your CV, because if you manage to publish in these journals, it would be a piece of cake for you to manage chapters submitted to your book. If you are working in the higher rank, submitting chapters for your book, it would be done just like a piece of cake. Now, when we want to submit a paper or a manuscript at the beginning for a journal, what the editors and reviewers are looking for. Some top journals, the chain is as follows, like there is a editor-in-chief, a couple of associate editors, and reviewers. So these journals, if you are lucky, your paper will be passed from the editor-in-chief to the associate editor. And it happened with me that the paper is passed from the editor-in-chief, but I was not lucky that the associate editor rejected the paper. So if you're lucky enough that the paper will be passed from the editor-in-chief to associate editor, then from the associate editor to the reviewers. So if the paper is passed to the reviewers, I can say that there is a good probability or a high probability that you will receive revisions, because most of the editors, if they don't find potential in the paper, they will not send it for external review. They don't want to waste the time of the reviewers. So if they find it like good enough, they will send it for external review. And at this stage, there is a high probability that you will receive comments. Once receive comments, and you manage to address them properly, there is a high chance that the manuscript is going to be accepted. But now let's see what the editors and reviewers are looking for in the manuscripts that we are submitting. The first point is that the originality. What's new about the subject or contribution? What is the new in your manuscript? What is the novelty of the manuscript? Are you going to bring like something new, or you are just reinventing the wheel, which is not suggested by the editors? Does the manuscript like have a sound argument? I mean, the problem statement, is it like very clear and your hypotheses are clear enough to justify publication in the journal? Relevance to an extension of existing knowledge. Usually, most of the editors look whether your manuscript is relevant to their scope, which is again within the scope, they look whether your manuscript is relevant to the articles that they have recently published. So it's good that when you submit a manuscript into a journal, that we look into the recent papers published in the journal, specifically during the last 2 years. The publications published in the last 2 years reflect the journal perspective of what articles they want to publish next. So don't look at what the journal published in the past decade, because what they have published in the past, they may not be they are interested at the moment. So is it relevant to the existing knowledge, or you are going to extend what they have in their journal? This is another story. Research methodology. Are the methods relevant to the research? Some researchers might use methods that are not appropriate to address the research questions, or might not address or solve or verify, I can say, the hypothesis. Clarity, structure, and the quality of writing. This is very important. Your manuscript should be very clear. Usually when I review like manuscripts, like for my students or for my or when I have been invited to review for many journals, usually the authors write like very nonsense sentences, which makes it like why it is important to mention these sentences. So it's good to be concise, short, informative, direct to the point, so that sentences should be coherent. There is a flow between moving from paragraph to paragraph. Experiment results, like the results are reliable and valid. This is again, maybe the author has used a good method But when it comes to the results, maybe the results are not reliable or not valid. This will raise an issue for the journal editors and reviewers. And this is like one of the most important parts that I really do care about when I submit my manuscripts, and even when I review manuscripts for journals, theoretical and the practical implications. Like by the end of the day, what is the importance of your study? Like when we say theoretical implications, what your study will add to the theory. So what your study will add to the existing literature, to the existing body of knowledge, what the theory will, what your research will add to the existing body of literature, to the theoretical contribution. So if you are trying to extend or to modify a specific theory, you need to provide the contributions to the theoretical side of the research. And when it comes to practical implications, here we need, this is the real power of the research, where you need to show how your research is going to be implemented in a practice. What are the implications like for developers, for policymakers, for further research, for stakeholders, for consumers, individuals. It depends who are the participants of your study. Recency and relevance of references. This is very important. When you submit an article today, make sure that many references cited in your manuscript that are from 2020 or 2021. If your references is based on old references, this will reflect that your manuscript is old. Like we understand that, like you might write an article today, it might be published after 5 years, and it happened. So in this case, you need to keep updating your references so that at each time you submit to a journal, you need to update the references to show that the problem is still exists, the hypotheses are still valid, and in the discussion, when you compare, you need to compare with the recent literature. This is very important. And adherence to the editorial scope and objectives of the journal. We need to look at the scope and the objectives of the journal, whether our manuscript fits the scope and the objectives of the journal. And as I mentioned before, you can do all of these, like you can fit your manuscript to the scope, to the objectives, and still you get rejection. Other than the scope and the objectives, we need to look at the recent resources or the recent papers that the journal already published. This is very, I can say this is very important, and one of the core tasks for the editors-in-chief. Like they will see whether your paper is going to be cited or not. Because if you just remember in the last few slides, I mentioned what is impact factor is dividing the number of citations by publications. So increasing the number of citations will increase the impact factor of the journal. The editor will look at the manuscript. Is it enough of adequate quality to be cited later on? So usually, many journals look for publishing review studies, review or survey or systematic reviews or critical review studies. Usually this type of publications increases the citation of the journal. And some recent, if you try to use some recent theoretical models, or you are doing a contribution to specifically to the theory, with strong theoretical background, this is what the editors are looking for. And again, they will ask whether it's going to be cited or not, because bringing citations will increase their impact factor. There are reasons for getting the paper rejected in impact factor journal. There are some reasons or several reasons for getting the rejections. So this is like when you submit your manuscript at the first time, this is how it looks like from the perspective of authors. like this is our manuscript, how it looks like. But in fact, when it is like reviewed or initially screened or initially reviewed by the editor-in-chief or reviewers, this is how it looks like in reality. This is how the manuscript looks like when it comes to reality. Like there is like not the problem statement like is not clear, the objectives are not clear, your literature is inadequate to justify that there is a research gap, your like methodology is not appropriate, or there is not sufficient justification to use a specific methodology. So this is how it looks like in reality when we receive like in one paper, I submitted one paper, it was reviewed by 8 reviewers, and I received 27 pages of comments. The paper was just 20 pages. The paper itself is 20 pages, but I received 26 pages of comments. But then we managed to address the comments. Then we got another round. The comments is reduced to 3 pages. We addressed the comments, and then the paper got accepted. So this is how it looks like in fact in reality. So the reasons is that like one of the reasons is issue is not important or not original. Maybe the problem that you want to address is not or no longer interested by the audience of the journal. So it is or it is not original. Not original, it means the journal already published a lot of such type of articles. Not appropriate for the journal, it's out of the scope. It's not, the manuscript doesn't fit within the scope or objectives of the journal. Failure to format the paper according to the journal guidelines, like maybe the journal request like for example, you use like APA style. You have used IEEE or MLA or Harvard or whatever. Maybe they request such like the tables, how the tables are organized. Some journals request to split the tables and figures in another file. Some of them ask the authors to put it within the text. And so some of the like Emerald journals, they request you have a structured abstract, like you have the purpose, you have the methodology, you have the results, you have the originality. So it depends. So it's better, it's always good to read the journal guidelines before submitting any paper. Poor structure. The structure of the paper is poor, that doesn't qualify it for publication. Unclear hypothesis or research questions, because if the hypothesis or research questions are not clear, then the research is useless. This is what we want to measure at the beginning. This is the hypothesis, like we need to validate the hypothesis by the end of the research. If the hypotheses are unreliable or unclear, this will raise a big question mark, which will, it means all the research is useless. Very old data, and here I can say that there are like 2 types of data. If like in business information systems, marketing, and like the data could be collected through surveys, questionnaire surveys. If you have collected these data like 5-6 years ago, and you want to like, because now with the emergence of COVID-19, perceptions of people have already changed. So if you test or collected some data before the COVID, and you collect it again after the COVID, of course there is a significant difference between the results, because the attitudes, behaviors of individuals have significantly changed over the time. And if we talk about like data like in computer science and machine learning, like we used some data sets that's already collected like from specific organizations, specific websites. If the data are all like 10 years back and many research already use the data, we can say that the data is exhausted and no longer of the interest of the editors or the reviewers. Poor or weak methods. This is another challenge, that like the methods are poor. Small or biased sample. Again, if the data is like collected through questionnaire surveys, the sample might be small enough, which could not justify publications by the editors. And for, like, we can say small or sample size, small or large sample size, there are different techniques and different references in the literature that if you want to see whether your sample is adequate enough to justify the publication or not, there are different references in the literature, and there are some tools also that you can use to calculate the sample size, and some references you can go back to them and compare like the size that you intend to collect with the literature. And when we say biased sample, like here, this is an example, like if you are collecting a sample of orange and apple, if the sample tends to be more to orange, it means why do you collect like two elements if your sample tends to be to orange more than the apple? So it was better to rely on orange only. This is the same as with the data collected by individuals. If the sample is not balanced between male and female, or the sample is, if you are collecting like data from students, if they are UG undergraduate students, like the year of study should be also balanced, and this is very important. Sometimes the statistics that we use, it could be inappropriate, or it is also that the statistics or the methods of analysis become very old. Like for you are using an old method for analyzing the data, and this already exhausted in the literature, and the editors and reviewers are no longer interested to publish such type of research. Result discussion is not convincing. This is very important in many articles, the discussion of the results. And most of the journal editors specifically focus on splitting the discussion from the results. Like, it's advised not to put the discussion with the results together in one section. It's better to split the discussion from the results. Usually in the discussion, we try to discuss the main results and the findings, and try to compare those results with the literature, the most recent literature, and try to provide our own interpretation, like why it is like significant or insignificant to justify the hypothesis that we already formulated at the beginning of the research. Again, this is very important. If you feel that that the language is a constraint for you, it's better to send the paper for proofreading, and because poor language affects the publication in those top-tier journals, because top-tier journals are mainly from UK, Netherlands, some European countries. So it's better to write the manuscript in the way that the reviewers and editors wants to see. Outdated references, as I mentioned just a few slides ago, I already mentioned it there. Again, the references that you have if you submit a paper in like today, it's better to have references from 2021 and 2020 to show that your problem is still exists, your hypotheses are still valid, and so on. Duplicate publications. If you see what, like, I see like X published a paper, I want to replicate the idea with different sample. It could be publishable in low journals, but not in impact factor journals, specifically if it's discussed by the reviewers. So it's not replication. There is duplication and there is replication. Replication is to replicate what the others did with different techniques or with different samples. Duplication is to take what someone did and you just rewrite it in your own words. So it is considered plagiarism. It's a type of plagiarism. Plagiarism itself is one of the issues that restrict the publication in many journals. Now, most of the Elsevier journals, they look for a similarity score between 15 to 20%. If you go beyond 20%, the paper will be rejected, rejected by the editor-in-chief. Plagiarism, even self-plagiarism, is also considered a part of plagiarism. This is very important. Purpose of submission. Many people think like when we publish a paper in an impact factor journal, they thought it's easy and it's just like a piece of cake. It's not like that. This is we can see here, this is the author brings his manuscripts and he tried to submit it to a journal. You can see like so many are standing in his way to get the manuscript accepted. We have the editor-in-chief, we have associate editors, we have reviewers. So you are lucky if the paper is going to be passed from the editor-in-chief to associate editors to reviewers. And in order, after doing all the revisions required from you from all of those stuff, then your paper will get accepted. As I mentioned, it might take 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. It depends on the review process and the availability of the reviewers. I have papers submitted to one journal. I was waiting for the decision. Exactly, the paper remained with the journal 2 years. Exactly 2 years, then I get rejection. Exactly 2 years. So even when I submitted the paper in 2018, in 2019, it was written in 2017. The paper was written in 2017. I submitted in 2019. Then I got rejection in just 2 months. So it's exactly 2 years. I was waiting for the decision, and then we got rejection. If you want to aim high, like high impact factor journals, what we should expect, like the higher the impact, this is what we are going to expect. More rejections, because if you look at the workshops conducted by the editors-in-chief and the way how they think, at the editorials that they usually wrote, they said that we are receiving around 40 to 50 articles per day. They are receiving 40 to 50 submissions per day. They will take only one and send it to review. So out of 40 to 50 submissions a day, they pick only one and send it for external review. This is really very challenging. Those top tier journals, they are receiving 5,000, 6,000 paper per year, and they publish around 90 to 100 only 90 to 100. So you will be lucky enough to get your paper published in those journals. Now I see that Professor Markus will leave academia and sit at home.
We have a lot of high impact publishing professors with us. Eric Capistrano from Manila, Dave Marshall from Dumaguete, and Fatih Çetin from Turkey. Maybe they can share their experience and how do you feel when you get rejected after 2 years and get 28 pages feedback?
Yeah, it's you know, when you keep working in the pool, you will get adapted to the situation. And specifically, if you have more papers in the pool, you don't care whether one paper is rejected, one paper is, you will get revision, one paper is accepted. If you have more in the pool, in the pipeline, you will not. Of course, you will get upset when you got rejection. But if this is your first time, you might be upset for a few days. If you get adapted to this, once I will take my cup of coffee, I will forget it. Anyway, we should expect more rejections, a very long review process, because if the paper is going to be passed from the editor to reviewers, usually they will be given 30 to 45 days. Sometimes the reviewers are busy, so they will not review within the due time. They will like submit after 2 months, more than 2 months. It depends on their availability. Some of the reviewers, this is one of the not good signs, that the reviewer accepts the invitation, but he will not review the paper. So the editor will keep waiting for 30 to 45 days. After that, the reviewer will not submit the revision. Then the editor needs to contact another reviewer. Less help from reviewers or editors. You should remember that there is no mercy from the reviewers and the editors. They will act objectively. Some of the reviewers are acting subjectively, but most of them they are dealing with specifically if it's a blind review. So the reviewers, if they don't recognize the authors, this is a good point, so that the review process will be objectively undertaken. We should expect very strict comments. The comments would be like very deep, very strict. Honestly speaking, that I am learning while I published tens of impact factor journals. I'm still learning from the comments that I receive from the reviewers and editors. At each time we submit a manuscript, we got some insight, and like the way that we write, the way that we develop the hypothesis, the way that we develop the methods, the results. So we are learning. While I published a lot and I have good experience in that, but we are still learning. This is very important, and we need to say that it's important that even if we don't agree with the reviewer, this is a very important point. Even if we don't agree with the comment of the reviewer, we need to thank the reviewer when we respond to him. We need to say thank you, and we need to respond to his comment in the way that he or she likes. This is very important that we need to keep in mind. There are some.
We're running a little bit out of time, but can we also have a discussion with Eric, Dave, and Fatih soon?
Sorry?
Can we have a discussion with Eric, Dave, and Fatih? We're running a little bit out of time.
I just need 5 minutes.
Excellent.
Just 5 minutes. So there are some strategies for increasing the chances of publishing in those journals. Again, these are very short, very short. We need to follow the author guidelines, the scope, the paper type, the word length, and the references style. Remember that your abstract is your movie trailer. Before you go to the cinema, we watch the trailer, the movie trailer. If we like the trailer, we will purchase the ticket. Otherwise, we will ignore the movie. This is, again, the abstract is the trailer for your manuscript. Write it in the way that it should supposed to be. So even if you don't have experience with that, look at the abstracts written in the targeting journal that you want to submit. So see how it's written. Your introduction section should clearly indicate the study gap and how you are going to deal with it. Again, in the introduction, usually I prefer to write it like we need to write a general background about the topic in the first paragraph. In the second paragraph, we try to elaborate more in the domain that we are trying to study. In the third paragraphs, we will start highlighting the research gaps that are available in the literature and why it is important to study them. And then we need to state our objectives. So usually 4 to 5 paragraphs, with each paragraph like 7 to 10 sentences would be more than enough to justify the importance and the research gap of your study in the introduction section. Research implication is your product, theoretical contributions to the literature, to the theory, the practical implications, why this research is important, what it will add to practice, how this research is going to affect the community. This is very important, that needs to be stated. And cite at least, this is very tricky and many don't have an idea about that. Cite at least 5 to 10 references from the journal that you want to submit. This is a tricky point, that most of the editors-in-chief look at this like citing 5 to 10. Why? Usually the editor or the reviewers, even in the journal, state that to show the relevance between your manuscript and the journal, while in fact this is not the ultimate goal. The main aim is to increase the citation of the papers of the journal. The other part is that there is a probability that the reader who is going to read your paper, once it is accepted, he will go through the references and he will also see how did you, like, what are the references that you have used, so he can refer back to the same references of the journal that you have published. This is a snowballing way for accessing the references. So by the end, it's the main aim is to increase the number of citations. It's not about showing relevance. And consult those who published in this. If this is your first experience, try to consult those who publish in impact factor journals for reviewing and co-authoring the work with you. If this is your first experience, it's good to refer to your colleagues or anyone who has sufficient expertise in the domain. You can contact him. Many are very kind that if they have sufficient time, they will reply to your email and they will be happy to review your work and to co-author it with you. Of course, they will not review it for nothing. They will review and put their names in the manuscript. And check the plagiarism before submission. Most of the journals, all of the journals, checking the similarity score. And as I mentioned, it's those top tier journals. They are very strict to like 15 to 20% of similarity in Turnitin, iAuthenticate, or any other plagiarism detection tools. This is the last slide. The order of writing. Like now, if you want to start a new research, from where you will start. It's the good practice is that you start with the literature review. You need to see what the others have done, what are the research gaps, so that it will furnish the way for you to see what you are going to do. Then you will write the method. What is the method that you are going to use? And then you will demonstrate the results based on the method. You will discuss your results and then the research implications. And here I mean, again, the theoretical contributions, practical implications. There are some articles which, in addition to these two, we write some methodological contributions. It means the study add a contribution to the methodology itself. And the limitations and the future research conclusion. Then we write the introduction, because once we put all these sections together, then we understand now the whole picture of the study. It's easily to go back and write the introduction. If you write the introduction first, then you write the whole. It's not a good practice, because things will be changed during analyzing the results, during the interpretation of the results. Then we put, of course, at the beginning we have a tentative title, but the final formulated title, it would be at the end. From the title, we usually detect the keywords or identify the keywords from the title, and then we write our abstract. Title, keywords, and abstract should be linked in a very scientific way. So the keywords that appear in the title should be available in the keyword section and should be specifically mentioned in the abstract. I'm sorry, I think I have taken 4 minutes more than the expected time, but I try to make it, as I mentioned, short as possible.
My God, that is really, really great. Thank you so much, Mostfafa. If you can switch off your slides, we have the pictures, and I opened the discussion. Maybe Eric, you were laughing so much. What is your experience?
Because like everything that Professor, Dr. Mostfafa said is quite true. I remember the first paper that I got published. It was over 2 years, like 3 journals, 3 rejections, over 2 years. And then the 4th one, we had 3 rounds of revisions to make. And the funny thing was that the comments were like something like 4 pages, but then when we did the revisions, plus the one thing is also important is also that when you respond to each of the comments, I ended up with 15 pages of responses to the review comments. Yeah, that's and you have to do it in a very polite manner. Like I agree. It has you have to be very polite regardless of how much you hate the reviewer or the comments that there is. But I do have one question, Professor, because like
I just want to mention like the politeness of replying to reviewers. When I start before submitting my third research paper, after publishing 2 papers, then my master supervisor, he suggested a conference for me in FLAIRS. FLAIRS, one of the famous conferences in computer science. He suggested that conference for me to submit a paper there. We submitted a paper, and then I received a list of comments because that was my first experience on how to deal with the reviewers. So how do I dealt with the reviewers? I replied, I act aggressively against the reviewer and the conference chair as well. I said, this is not true. Maybe you did not read the paper well. Maybe you don't understand what we mean by this, by that. Then immediately when I submit the response, immediately I got rejection. So this is that we need to say that the reviewer is always true.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what's your question, Eric?
Yeah, but no, because the problem I'm encountering a problem we're in. Yeah, because it's true that especially because I'm from Philippines, like I'm from Southeast Asia, I'm from Philippines. I kind of like having a huge difficulty publishing on my own, like me. Because like sometimes even though let's say I believe that there's a good theoretical or practical contributions, the fact that the data is from Philippines alone is enough for me to get rejected because they're saying it's the sample is too small or too significant compared to the international scene. So the only way for me to do that is to collaborate with someone and just do a cross country thing. However, that actually dilutes my path towards promotion because every time my university, every time they add like say 3 or more co-authors, I don't get full credit for the I don't get full credit anymore for the publication. Like I get probably like 3/4 credit. So my question is like, how do you balance that? Like, what advice can you give, especially for people like me from Southeast Asia, if we really want to target those top tier journals?
The idea is very simple. Maybe because we are all like since like from whether the data is collected from developing or developed countries, the issue is the same. When you write your article, don't focus the problem statement on the country or on the region, right? The problem statement is a real world problem. That there is a problem in the theory. That there is a problem in, for example, if it's in the technology, try to say the theoretical and the practical problems that will motivate the logical stance of formulating your research questions or formulating your hypothesis. So usually this is again what you said. When I review articles for this type of journals, I usually, if the article, like if the introduction, if it is, for example, let's say if it's like now I am Dubai, if the article is written about Dubai or in the UAE in general, if the introduction is fully written about the UAE, the title is UAE, abstract about UAE, literature review, the methodology, I will straightforward provide a rejection for the paper. Because for international journals, those like you in Southeast Asia will not be interested to read a paper about what the implications that is going to be reflected in the UAE. We need a paper to read the implications that could be generalized to everywhere. So when we write a paper, it's better, and this is even the advice that I provide for my PhD students. They usually like, because we are in the UAE, so at the beginning they say, the problem is in the UAE, there is no studies in the UAE. I said, who cares? Who cares whether there are studies in the UAE or in Germany or in Philippines or in Malaysia? Who cares? What we care about is the generalization of the results. The results cannot be generalized if you restrict the problem statement to the country. So it's better everything is written from the perspective of, I mean, a generalized way. Only at the methodology part, you will say that I collected the data from Philippines.
Okay. So that's not a problem because
don't mention that in your title, in your abstract, in your introduction. Just mention it in the methodology, just like in one sentence. That's fine.
Maybe Dave and Fatih, you just share your experience. Fatih, you told me that you got a rejection letter of 28 pages, and Dave and I will try to publish in high impact journals. Fatih.
Thank you, Markus. Thank you, Mustafa, for your contributing information about publishing in high-tier journals. My opinion is somewhat different. It is a quantitative type of producing the knowledge, but when we look at the qualitative, not quantitative, it can be opposite, because first thing, maybe I want to suggest young researchers, first thing is you need a story. You need a story which depends on gap in literature. If you have a story, this is just a methodology. You can use quantitative or qualitative, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter to generalize. The matter is you need a good story to tell someone. So if we have a good story, it doesn't matter where the story is lived, because we are a social sciences, so we need to explain a phenomenon, a social phenomenon. So maybe we need to push our young researchers to find a good story from the literature, a research gap. If you have found and defined this gap very well in your theoretical part, so you can use whatever methodology, in maybe quantitative or qualitative or hybrid methodology, it doesn't matter. But I think the big issue is to find a new and interesting story from the literature. Thank you, Markus.
Dave, what is your opinion? What is your experience from the Philippines as well?
Yeah, I think the three gentlemen shared already, but I think I would add more into the soft part of the hard skills in writing. The first is, I think you have to consider on the criterion on relevance. Dr. Capistrano, Professor Mostfafa mentioned about you just have to hit the headline, you just have to hit the theme of the conference, the journal itself. So it means that if you have a paper that talks about the lives of the digital or the millennials, for sure you will not submit that in the chemistry journal, in the physics journal. Relevance is very important, and add to that timing and appropriateness. The second that I would like to add also is a rejoinder of what Eric was mentioning about being patient. Patience really in waiting, in the submission, and the entire production cycle of the publication. Because writing is a different story. Here we are talking about the publication. Patience in the sense that you have to learn from your mistakes. I myself, just to tell you a story, I have a compilation of comments. I have a journal of all the comments from the publications that I submitted. From that journal, I call that my mistakes of diary. I read it from time to time, and just to make sure that I would not repeat the same mistakes. And it is really true that there are some ridiculous comments that sometimes you hate them, but you have no choice. You need you need to follow, and you have to respectfully respond to the comments from the reviewer. And I think the third, to encapsulate my sharing, is art. we should have the art of, as mentioned by Fatih here, the art of storytelling, the art of contribution, and the art of implications of the generalizations and interpretations that you have. It means that you need to have value, not just simply because you have the data, and not just simply because you have all the properties, attributes that you would like to share, and the literature. But the most important thing, I guess, is there is value of what you have written. Be it a quantitative type of study, a qualitative type of study, a global type of study, a case study for a specific cohort of respondents. So relevance, patience, and art. Thank you very much.
If I may disagree with one thing that Professor Mostfafa said, like regarding your experience with rejection, it's not coffee in my case. It's alcohol. I remember because I suddenly remembered an advice that was given to me. I was like, always keep a stack of alcohol so that when you get rejection, you get a drink. You get accepted, you get a drink.
Yes.
That's what he said. That's what he said. And he's one of the top. I mean, he's also one of the top professors publishing in the field as well. I met him in Taiwan when I was a student. but that's I mean, just to lighten the mood a bit.
Yeah. Thank you.
Mostfafa, thank you so much. You see, we had a great discussion. We are running a little bit late, but Mostfafa, if you at any time you need to co-author, I'm here. Yeah.
Thank you.
I also now know I published with Dave Marshall. Now I know where we went through. We want to publish with Fatih, and we got also a rejection. I was very sad, and Fatih said, "No, just have a drink, and we will try it again." And we have to answer it. So this was great advice. I think this was a great presentation, Mostfafa. Thank you so much, Professor Mostfafa Al-Emran from the British University of Dubai.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation. Thank you.